this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's begin with our top story, which is yet again on the tensions between India and Canada. Now, as tensions between India and Canada have sharply escalated over the last 2 weeks, India has now told Canada in no uncertain terms to withdraw 41 of its diplomats from its High Commission in New Delhi and consulates across the country. The deadline is for the 10th of October. This comes after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau publicly accused India of orchestrating the killing of Khalistani terrorist and Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Justin Trudeau had said that Canada is not looking to escalate the situation with India and it will continue to engage responsibly and constructively with New Delhi. Trudeau has said Canada wants to be on the ground in India to help the Canadian families there. India, remember, immediately dismissed the allegations that Trudeau had levelled as absurd and motivated. The allegation, which is yet to be supported by any tangible evidence, has kicked up a major diplomatic row between the two countries, with Ottawa and New Delhi initially expelling each other's senior diplomats. This was followed by India suspending its visa services in Canada and asking Ottawa to downsize its missions in the country. Canada currently has 62 diplomats stationed in India, and New Delhi's demand for a reduction of Canadian diplomatic strength by 41 makes it clear that it seeks parity in the strength and rank equivalence of diplomatic personnel in each other's countries. This imbalance has been a point of contention throughout this diplomatic crisis. Peter Boehm, chair of the Canadian Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Trade, has said, and I quote, "Declaring more Canadian diplomats persona non grata wouldn't help the situation and would make reducing the emotions associated with this disagreement more difficult." On its part, it seems Canada is unwilling to back down from its allegations. Peter Boehm has also said India views Canada as an easy mark due to its limited capacity to retaliate given its minority government. He said, and I quote, "India knows our capacity to retaliate is limited. They know we have a minority government and it's aware of the consequent politics at play. And of course, India has an election on the horizon." Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shares power with Indian origin and Canadian Sikh leader Jagmeet Singh, who is a well-known Khalistani sympathizer. Meanwhile, US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller has once again reiterated that the US has engaged with the Indian government at the highest levels and urged it to cooperate with Canada's investigation. In fact, Miller also said the US Secretary of State had an opportunity to discuss this issue in his meeting with India's foreign minister last week. Antony Blinken did in fact raise this issue during his meeting with India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar in Washington, D.C. last week, emphasizing the importance of collaboration on this issue between India and Canada. While India maintains that the allegations are baseless, Jaishankar has emphasized that if Canada shares specific and relevant information, India is open to examining it. As we said, no credible evidence has been forthcoming so far, and it remains unclear what kind of an off-ramp Justin Trudeau may be looking for, if at all, to de-escalate tensions between the two sides. What is clear, though, is that the diplomatic downsizing will further hurt not only the already fraught India-Canada ties, but also Canada's education sector, given that 40% of the foreign students in Canada are from India. This is a significant number of Canadian diplomats that we are talking about. All right, let's go across to my colleague Shri, who joins us as always from Washington, D.C. With his perspective on all the top stories on Global Lens. Shri, great to have you back on the show. This is something that India had threatened Canada with a few days ago, asking the country to downsize its diplomatic presence here. Now a deadline has been set. Ottawa has been asked to reduce its diplomatic strength by as much as 41 out of a total of 62 diplomats who are currently present on Indian soil. That's a huge number that we are talking about. How do you think this is likely to impact not just India-Canada ties, but like I said, Canada's education sector, because a huge number of students from India go to that country every year. It goes without saying that they earn a lot of revenue from Indian students. And a significantly reduced diplomatic presence in India would certainly mean that it will be that much more challenging for Canada to even, for example, process visas.
No, absolutely not, Neha, because there are, at last count, an estimated 320,000 Indian students in Canada. That's 3.2 lakh Indian students in Canada. Now, apart from the fact that these students are going to go on to become, potentially productive part of Canada's economy, therefore creating wealth for the Canadian economy, the immediate challenge for Canada is that what happens if this supply of students stops? The universities are obviously going to suffer. So now, with India asking Canada to repatriate 41 of its diplomats in Delhi, in India, I think there's a real danger of this relationship spiraling beyond a point where it can be repaired, Neha. Because don't forget that in the past we have had we have had a long history actually with Canada where the relationship has been very, very cold. So we had our own Cold War with Canada for several years, largely because of India's nuclear program development. Disagreement was around that. So I think there's a real threat that this may reach a point where we cross the Rubicon and there's no going back. I don't think we should allow it to come to that point. I think there's a need for someone to step in, someone like the US to step in and do two things. One, it has been asking India to look at the allegation that Canada has made, and India has offered that if there's a credible evidence you submit to us, we will definitely look into it. In fact, Jaishankar said, why won't we look into it? I mean, we'd be mad not to look into it, as was his implication. So while US has been pressurizing India to cooperate with Canada, I think it's incumbent on the US also to put pressure on Canada to look at least the 21 names that India has given to Canada, saying that these are people, specific people, Sikh separatists, Khalistani separatists who are causing problem of not just an attack on India's sovereignty, but also other activities like money laundering, supply of arms and ammunition, drug trades, and illegal human trafficking, all kinds of things that these people are involved in, Neha. So I think it is incumbent on Canada also, if the Prime Minister is serious about what he's saying, which is that he has no intention of escalating this row with India, then I think he has to make a move which shows that Canada is serious about it and is willing to walk the extra mile to de-escalate the situation. So I think what Canada could do is look at India's reports, which have been piling up for the last 40 years, dust them off and say, okay, we are going to institute an independent committee which is going to look at all the allegations or all the reports that India has submitted. And if any of these people if there's evidence that they have indulged in terrorism, then we will not care that these are Canadian citizens, but we will act against them, if need be, even extradite them to India. So some sort of a gesture has to come because India very clearly is not in a mood to back off, Neha. I mean, this is an escalation clearly from India's side, largely because India feels that it's morally right. It's morally in the correct position right now to make this kind of a demand. Because let us not forget, I mean, the farmers' protest, it was a simple change in basic law which would have helped the farmers. Now, there was no need for Canada or even Prime Minister Trudeau to step in and talk about India's agri reforms and the laws that we are trying to bring in. It was completely, I think, uncalled for. So I think Canada needs to recognize that while it cares about its voter base, about the Khalistani voter base that Trudeau's government depends on, there's only so much pandering that it will allow or it should do, and then work on creating a long-lasting relationship with India, because it's not just about the students, it's not just about the exchange of goods, the trade between the two countries, but also from a geopolitical context. Both Canada and India have one country to worry about, which is China. We have a lot of evidence. Canada itself has a lot of evidence. Has been a big issue in Canada that China has interfered in Canada's own elections. And Prime Minister Trudeau, unfortunately, has not done anything. It was with great, pressure from the opposition leaders and public opinion that finally an independent judge was, appointed to look into the allegations. So something similar needs to happen in the case of the evidence which India has submitted in the case of the Khalistani terrorist, Neha. And I think that would be a fair point from which India would start de-escalating and then going back to some sort of a position where a sensible, rational conversation can be had on this issue.
Well, you're quite right that, this is a very important escalatory measure that India has taken, and perhaps some sort of conciliatory gesture needs to come from Canada. On the face of it, Shri, it would seem like Justin Trudeau is digging his heels in, but there are some who believe that he may have painted himself into a corner with his shoot and scoot diplomacy. So the question I want to ask you is, while India has its own set of demands, including that Canada look into the various dossiers that have been submitted on Khalistani activities taking place on Canadian soil, do you believe from his point of view, Justin Trudeau may be looking for some sort of an off-ramp to de-escalate matters? And if at all that is true, what might that be?
No, so I think the onus is clearly on Canada, Neha, because one, they have not submitted any evidence which India says is credible evidence, right? So that's the first thing. I mean, saying that we have credible allegations, and based on that, we have decided to create this, a row between India and Canada. I mean, that I think, first of all, boggles my mind, because how can that happen? Because these are things that are done using the back channel where, diplomats talk to each other and say, okay, this is what we have, what do you have to say? And it's usually sorted out. So if he has chosen to bring this to the public fora based on very scant evidence, based purely on evidence that, they have, electronic evidence they have from the Five Eyes intelligence community, then I think Canada needs to ask itself whether that was the right thing to have done. Now, what can, Justin Trudeau do to basically de-escalate, and is basically to walk the talk. If he's serious about, a deeper engagement with India and not spoiling the relationship with India, then there has to be some solid move that comes from, Justin Trudeau, which says that, yes, we are cognizant of, the problem that India is facing because of a handful of people, not because of the Sikh community at all, but because of a handful of Khalistani people whose sources of funding, whose motivation are very different from the larger Sikh community. Because we know that Sikh community in India is very peaceful, most industrious, they are the most affable and friendly people. There's absolutely no reason for us to be upset with the Sikh community at large. It's only a handful of people that we have an issue with. Now, the crux of the problem, Neha, what it boils down to is this. Even if you look at the US's response on this issue has been rather tepid. It's pushing India to look at the allegation that Canada is making, but it itself has been a little tolerant of, the Khalistani movement, even in the US. There are people, even in the US, who are based here and conspiring against India on the Khalistani issue. So the reason is very simple, Neha, because unlike the ISIS or the Islamic terrorism issue, Sikh or the Khalistani separatism is not hurting Western countries. Okay, but I remember back in the late 80s, there was a CIA report which looked at the Khalistan issue and said that this could someday become a potential problem for Western countries as well. And now, in the case of Canada, this clearly is a present problem. There are Khalistani gang members who, are running gangs, who are dealing in drugs, who are dealing in arms and ammunitions. They are killing people for money. They're doing human trafficking. They're operating out of Canadian boundaries also in terms of procuring drugs from, Far East and also from the Afghanistan-Pakistan, corridor. So there is a threat which Canada is already facing. All it needs for Canada is to say that, yes, we have problem. We need to rise above our vote bank politics and look at this issue. And if there is any evidence which is coming either from, India or even US, because Neha, don't forget, US keeps tabs on everyone. So I would, I'd be very surprised if US didn't have evidence of what really these people are doing. So I don't buy that for a minute. US has a lot of intelligence. So I think Canada needs to look at that and rise above this petty politics and say, yes, we are going to do something which gives comfort to India and also addresses an issue which, is certainly going to threaten the Canadian society, if not today, tomorrow.
You're quite right, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Shri, that the West seems to only be concerned about Islamist terrorism, but not about Khalistani extremism, because it doesn't hurt them personally. That's where, unfortunately, the duplicity lies. All right, let's now move on to our next story, which is from the United States of America. And when we talk about the US, how can we not talk about Donald Trump? Former U.S. President Donald Trump appeared in a Manhattan court on Monday with his trial in a civil fraud case against him getting underway. New York's Attorney General Letitia James is seeking at least $250 million in fines, a permanent ban on Trump and his sons Donald Jr. and Eric from running businesses in New York, and a 5-year commercial real estate ban against Trump and the Trump Organization. The central accusation revolves around claims that Trump inflated his assets and net worth between 2011 and 2021 to obtain bank loans and lower insurance premiums. During the opening statements, the state's attorney accused Trump of generating over $100 million through fraudulent means, claiming he overvalued properties such as Trump Tower and his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Trump's defense team countered the accusation, asserting that his financial practices were entirely legal, emphasizing his expertise in real estate investments. Tensions ran high as Trump criticized the judge, Arthur Engoron, accusing him of bias and interference in the 2024 presidential election. Trump went as far as to say, and I quote, "This is a judge who should be disbarred. He should be out of office." The judge who had found Trump liable for fraud in a previous ruling is now overseeing this trial without a jury. Trump's allegations against Judge Engoron are just one aspect of the ongoing political drama surrounding the case. Trump told reporters before the trial began that the case was a scam, a sham, and political vendetta by Letitia James, the New York state attorney. Later, Trump called James, who is a Democrat, a corrupt person, a terrible person who's driving people out of New York. Now, if found guilty, Trump could face significant legal and financial consequences. Beyond the fines and bans sought by the Attorney General, the judge's previous decision to cancel business certificates for Trump's companies and appoint receivers to oversee their dissolution could have a far-reaching impact on Trump's empire. Trump's defense team maintains that valuation disagreements don't necessarily equate to fraud. The trial is expected to feature testimonies from many financial experts. This trial is just one of several legal challenges that Trump is currently battling. He faces criminal charges in Washington, Georgia, Florida, and New York, covering a range of allegations from election interference to handling classified documents. These legal troubles have made Trump the first sitting or former U.S. president to be criminally charged.
We have a racist attorney general who's a horror show, who ran on the basis that she was going to get Trump before she even knew anything about me. She used this to run for governor. She failed in her attempt to run for governor. She had virtually no polling. She came back and she said, well, now I'll go back to get Trump again. And this is what we have. It's a scam. It's a sham. Perfect. There was no crime. The crime is against me because we have a corrupt district attorney, but we have a corrupt attorney general, and it all comes down from the DOJ. They're totally coordinated this in Washington because I'm the leading candidate. I'm leading Biden by 10 points, and I'm leading the Republicans by 50 and 60 points. That's pretty much, they say, over. I never accept that, but they say it's over. This has to do with election interference, plain and simple. They're trying to damage me so that I don't do as well as I'm doing in the election. Businesses are fleeing New York because of horrible, horrible attorney generals and judges like we have. They go to other places where they can be treated fairly and with respect. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, let's go back to Shri at this point. Shri, it's a scam, it's a sham, it's a witch hunt, it's election interference. The Attorney General is a horrible, terrible person. The judge should be disbarred. Of course, everyone is corrupt and dishonest but Donald Trump, a paragon of virtue. That's Donald Trump. Give us a lowdown on all the drama that unfolded in the Manhattan court yesterday.
So, Neha, as you can imagine, it was a day full of drama yesterday inside the courthouse and outside the courthouse, where Trump was speaking to, media and also tweeting on Truth Social on the judge, making personal attacks not just on the district attorney, Letitia James, but also the judge. But one thing Mr. Trump does very successfully is to conflate issues. In this case, obviously, he's got multiple indictments which he's facing. But this is a very different case. This is basically on the fact that Trump and Trump Organization and his sons inflated the valuation of properties to be able to take loans from banks and therefore profit unduly through fraud. So that is the primary allegation, and this dates back to as far back as 2011, Neha. And there is the judge has looked at the evidence, and in the previous September ruling has already come to the conclusion that yes, there was fraud that happened. So now the trial that's happening is basically on what sort of a punitive damage to be put on the Trump Organization, and how to deal legally with the fact that the Trump Organization and the Trumps have defrauded and basically cooked up their books in some sense in terms of the valuation of assets. So whether it'll be $250 million or much more than that. So but Mr. Trump is able to conflate all this into one issue, which is the fact that he is a presidential Republican nominee for 2024 and a very, very, by far the most popular Republican candidate. Therefore, he's able to bring those issues together. But whereas the fact is, this is a very separate issue. This has been something which the court has looked into and has said that it has been going on since 2011. And this matters tremendously to Mr. Trump because, he's a man who loves to have his a name on buildings, right? Trump Tower, Trump Plaza, and everything else. So if, for example, the courts decide that he cannot operate business in India, or the buildings or the assets he owns in New York are given into receivership, or they are liquidated to pay for the damages, the court damage brought against them, then it means that it's a very big personal blow for Trump, the real estate magnate, because, by touting his success as a real estate developer, as a man who could, create magic, he went on to become a very popular television star. From that, he went on to become, a wild card entrant into U.S. politics. And guess what? He ended up beating Hillary Clinton to become the U.S. president. And now he's running again for, a presidentship. So, if that story is taken away, if people are told that, he built this empire based on lies and the fact that he was not really worth, the billions that he claimed to be, then that is going to be a huge personal setback to brand Trump, Neha. And that's why, we saw Mr. Trump in the court there yesterday, because he has not gone for many other trials. He's chosen not to go. His lawyers have gone. But in this case, he went personally because he needed to be out in front, of the media, of the narrative from the district attorney, to tell people directly, his voter base directly, that I'm the victim here. I'm not the one who stole or misled anyone.
Right. And how dare anyone accuse Donald Trump of not being a multi-billionaire? All right. Let's now move on to our next story, which is also from the United States. Now, there has been a stunning development on Capitol Hill as Republican Representative Matt Gaetz has made a bold move to oust fellow Republican Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. This move has injected an additional element of chaos into an already tumultuous Congress. It's a political bombshell, as Representative Matt Gaetz, a far-right Republican known for his controversial stances, introduced a motion to vacate aimed at forcing a vote to remove McCarthy as Speaker of the House. In an impromptu press conference following his move on the House floor, Gaetz acknowledged that this effort might not succeed in the first attempt. He said, "I think that is the likely outcome." However, he left open the possibility of repeated attempts, predicting that support for ousting McCarthy could grow beyond the initial vote. So why is this happening? Some Republicans have threatened to oust McCarthy over relying on Democratic votes, as he did on Saturday, to advance legislation staving off a government shutdown. Gaetz also cited the possibility of the House holding votes on sending aid to Ukraine as another reason to oust him. Gaetz further said members of the Republican Party might vote differently on a motion to vacate if they heard what the Speaker had to share with us about his secret side deal with Joe Biden on Ukraine. "I will be listening. Stay tuned," he said. Now, in his Sunday remarks responding to the thwarted government shutdown, President Biden called on McCarthy and other Republican leaders to follow through on a commitment to hold a standalone vote on funding for Ukraine. Biden said, "We cannot, under any circumstance, allow American support for Ukraine to be interrupted." When asked about his preferred replacement for McCarthy, Matt Gaetz said, "I think very highly of Steve Scalise. I would vote for Steve Scalise." Now, Steve Scalise currently serves as House Majority Leader, the second highest ranking position in the chamber. Remember, Republicans control the House by a narrow 221 to 212 majority, which means that just a handful of defections could threaten McCarthy's grip on power if all Democrats vote against him. Kevin McCarthy has responded to Gaetz' challenge by calling it disruptive, and he appears confident that he will survive this challenge. He said, "Bring it on." This isn't the first time that McCarthy has faced opposition within his own party. He secured the speakership of the House after 15 rounds of voting in January this year. And as part of that victory, he agreed to a rule change that allowed any member to call for a vote to remove the speaker, setting the stage for Gaetz' recent move. No U.S. House Speaker has ever been removed from this powerful position, which is second in line in succession for the presidency after the Vice President. Now, regarding how Democrats may respond to this challenge, it remains uncertain. Some House Democrats have expressed reservations about supporting McCarthy due to a lack of trust, particularly after he reneged on a debt limit deal with President Biden and initiated an impeachment inquiry against Biden despite a lack of concrete evidence of wrongdoing. Democrats are also upset that McCarthy provided little time to review the stopgap spending bill before Saturday's vote, even though he needed their support. This leaves open the possibility that Democrats could demand concessions from McCarthy in exchange for their support, or they could potentially join right-wing Republicans in their efforts to unseat him. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has said, "What we are seeing with House Republicans is pure chaos." Let's find out what Shri thinks about this. Shri, why is the House Speaker in so much trouble with his own partymen? What are the chances that he could actually become the first U.S. House Speaker in history to be ousted from office? And also, is this a huge dilemma for the Democrats? Which way are they likely to vote if it were to come to that?
So why is he facing this problem, Neha? The answer is very clear. I mean, this is because of, the government funding. The Republicans wanted Democrats to be brought to their heels before to their knees before they would allow the government funding to continue. Otherwise, the U.S. was looking at a government shutdown. So, before the deadline expired, they managed to, in the last hours, get an interim bill which would keep the government running and all the federal employees in their job. So that was the reason. And he did so, Mr. McCarthy did so with the support of Democrats, because the Republicans were very against that. So the very fact that he managed to do it, pushed it through to prevent a government shutdown, has upset members of his own party. So that is the reason. Number two, now what can Mr. McCarthy do? Will he become the first speaker to be, voted out and ejected from the House? Well, the first thing Mr. McCarthy do is, he needs the support of Democratic Party. He needs members from the Democratic Party to vote with him, vote, against Mr. Gaetz's proposal, motion, and he needs to survive this. So without Democratic support, he's not going to survive, Neha. That is very, very clear. So what can potentially happen? Now, there are three scenarios. One, when this motion is put to vote, the Democrats could either, vote no, which would, as you said, could be a little embarrassing for them, given that they are supposed to be anti-Republicans all the time and oppose them no matter what they say. So that is one option where they vote no. Second is they can be in the House but not vote anything, which is basically register their presence, which means that the number of votes which is required for the threshold will come down, or therefore McCarthy may survive. Number three, they can not be present. The Democrats can choose to walk out and not be present when this motion is put to vote. So again, that will reduce the number, make sure that the number is below the threshold, and again, it will invalidate the vote. So these are three things he can do, or he could potentially refer this to a committee, of his allies, basically people who support him, and then the committee could come back and say that there's nothing wrong, and and give him a clean chit and he survives. But one thing is clear, if this happens, this will be, I mean, first of all, it's only the third time in the House's 234 history that a motion to, oust a speaker has been brought, Neha. And in the most recent incident that happened was in 2015, when there was a proposal to oust John Boehner as the House Speaker, but he resigned before he could be ousted. So now in this case, it remains to be seen which way, the chips fall. But it's safe to say that he may scrape through with the support of Democrats, because had it been a normal situation where his own party has given up on him and then he needs the support of Democrats, it's driving very hard. But in this case, the Democrats may support him to make a point against the Republicans, and also to own his loyalty, and the message that Democrats would be sending him is that we save your skin and you don't forget that. So we'll call that check in whenever we feel like it. So it could be a strategic win for Democrats if they help McCarthy survive, Neha.
Politics is fascinating, isn't it, Shri? The game or the art of the possible, as they say. Who knows, in this situation, the Democrats could very well strike a deal with McCarthy and save his skin, and in the process, extract some important concessions from him. And of course, that would mean they end up voting for the man they love to hate. All right, moving on to our next story. This is also from the United States. When we have Shri on the show, we've got to have stories from the United States. All right, this is an interesting one. In a court showdown, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella took the stand against Google, revealing startling insights into the tech giant's competition and concerns about Google's dominance. In a dramatic courtroom testimony in Washington, D.C., the Microsoft CEO didn't hold back in his critique of Google's dominant position in the search engine market. Nadella expressed concerns that Google's hold on the industry makes it nearly impossible for competitors to emerge. You can call it popular, but to me it's dominant, Nadella told a Google lawyer during a tense cross-examination. Microsoft's Bing has been striving to gain market share against Google since 2009. But Nadella revealed that it faced insurmountable obstacles, largely due to Google's arrangements with Apple. Nadella emphasized the critical role of distribution in the success of a search engine. He revealed that Microsoft was willing to go to great lengths, even willing to pay a high price to make Bing the default search engine on Apple's iPhone. Defaults are the only thing that matters, Nadella said in court. He dismissed Google's claims that users could easily switch to another search engine as bogus. Despite Microsoft's eagerness to secure the default status on Safari, Apple chose to stick with Google, a decision that reportedly brings in billions of dollars annually through a lucrative revenue-sharing agreement. With Apple's rejection of Microsoft's advances, Bing has remained a relatively small player in the search engine market. Nadella said Microsoft continues to invest in Bing, hoping for a possible paradigm shift or government intervention to restructure the business. It would be a game changer for Bing to be a default on Safari, he said. In a surprising twist, Nadella also expressed concern that Google could potentially use its dominance in search to strong-arm content providers, particularly those essential for training generative AI models. I worry a lot, in spite of my enthusiasm, that this vicious cycle can become even more vicious, Nadella warned, emphasizing the need for vigilance in the tech industry. Earlier this year, Microsoft made a bold move by integrating AI technology, including ChatGPT, into its Bing search engine, while this sparked expectations of a challenge to Google's dominance. Nadella argues that the emergence of AI may not be enough to reshape the landscape. The Microsoft CEO's testimony in the high-stakes courtroom battle against Google has shed light on the fierce competition between tech giants and the challenges faced by potential rivals. As the trial unfolds, the tech industry and regulators are closely watching, anticipating its potential implications for the future of online search and competition in the digital realm. All right, let's go back to Shri at this point. Shri, we've seen some very high profile and historic antitrust trials in the United States over the years. And despite the United States placing a premium on competition and, killing monopolies at any cost. Fact of the matter is that you have so many of them, and perhaps the best example of that really is Google. And you can hardly blame Nadella for expressing his frustration the way he did in the courtroom with all those arguments that he made. At the end of the day, is it all about the moolah? Because that's what he seemed to suggest.
So, Neha, it's ironic that the CEO of Microsoft should be testifying in, Congress against a monopoly company. Because if you remember, the historic tech case fought in the US was against Microsoft in the 1990s, where Microsoft was accused of using its monopoly to dominate the desktop environment and keeping other players from coming in. So if you look at it even today, there are only two operating systems that the world has when it comes to laptops and desktops. One is, of course, the Apple environment, the iOS environment, but the rest of it is still Microsoft. It's the Microsoft Windows. So, despite the antitrust case and everything, Microsoft still rules the desktop environment, right? So that is one part, Neha. And so Microsoft basically escaped that antitrust, lawsuit and the threat of breaking up by promising the government, with settling with the US government, saying that, okay, we are going to open up our, our system, our operating system to other software to allow them to work within the Microsoft environment. So now guess one of the companies, the biggest gainer of that concession, guess who that company was? It was Google. Because at that point, the fight was about Internet Explorer as much, where, Microsoft was trying to say that this is not a product. This is a feature of our operating system. It is not a product in itself. So, when Microsoft was forced to open up and allow and give its API application program interface to, other companies, other developers, Google was the one that came in with a new search technology, with an entirely new way of searching the internet, ranking the pages, and then it built a completely new business model around the search industry. And then, as you know, the rest is history. So Google is much bigger, more powerful than, Microsoft today in the web space. As Nadella said, it's like Google Web. It's not the internet. So, but the fact is, the government's antitrust case against Google also comes at a time where the search industry itself is undergoing a massive shift. So, if you look at the the large language models like ChatGPT, the generative AI mode in which search has now got into, and Microsoft is one of the largest investors in OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, Neha. So this means that now the fight is going to be between Microsoft and Google in the search space. And very, very interestingly, Google is the one which is on the back foot as far as AI is concerned. Obviously, Google has its Bard AI system, but as of now, from all accounts, ChatGPT's generative AI seems far better in terms of capabilities, in terms of search. Of course, ChatGPT is not live like a Bard. It is unable to pull in current information because its training model stopped in 2021. So it has data only till that time. But this is now going to be a very interesting game. And there are a lot of Google shareholders, investors, who are worried that Google may lose its footing in the search industry because the nature of search itself has changed, Neha. For example, if you were to, in the traditional way, search for, let's say, a cocktail recipe, you will go onto Google and say, okay, I'm looking for a cocktail recipe to make, let's say, Long Island iced tea. And you might get 10 different recipes. You might have to go through it, and then compile everything and decide which is the best and make it. But using a ChatGPT, a search or the assistant, what you can effectively do is tell the ChatGPT that these are the ingredients I want, this is how much alcohol I have or what kind of alcohol I have. And then it'll tell you an exact recipe, step by step, on how to make it. So look at how search itself has changed. So the way I'm interacting with the web, the internet, to do things itself has changed. So now that is why I say that this is an unfortunate timing for the government, because it comes a little too late in the day to question Google's monopoly, because I think going ahead, the search industry and the entire internet industry is going to be significantly disrupted by AI. There are Neuralink, all those things are going to come in. So the entire future is going to be very different, Neha, than what we see it as today. So I think the case is a little late in the day, but there is no doubt that Google is by far the most successful, but also because, I use multiple search engines, I use DuckDuckGo, I use Firefox. So, but the fact is I always end up coming back to, Google, because it does surface results much better than any other, search engines, Neha. That is an unfortunate reality.
It is. And now we also know, Shri, that you've been looking for cocktail recipes online of late. Maybe I will have a chat with you about this offline later.
Disclosure, though, I'm a teetotaler currently.
You are? Oh my God. Okay. I'm a little disappointed just when I got a little excited about learning a few new cocktail recipes from you. And I also love your message for Satya Nadella, which in essence is this: stop being a crybaby, suck it up. You've done it too. The chickens have now come home to roost. Not in as many words though. All right. Let's now move on to our next story. Could the election of Mohammad Muizzu send shockwaves through the Indian Ocean region? Muizzu, even before being sworn into office, has pledged to remove Indian military personnel from the Maldives, raising serious questions and concerns about the country's geopolitical alliances and its relationship with China and India. In a stunning electoral upset, Mohammad Muizzu, backed by the People's National Congress, secured victory in the Maldivian presidential runoff. His campaign was centered around the promise to remove Indian military personnel stationed in the country. Muizzu's win represents a significant political shift as he leans towards closer ties with China. This election was seen as a de facto referendum on the country's foreign relations. The people have told us they don't want foreign military here. That's what Muizzu said, among other things. India has had a military presence in the Maldives with 75 personnel stationed there. New Delhi says these personnel are primarily involved in maintaining and operating helicopters and an aircraft donated to the Maldives. However, President-elect Muizzu alleges that this presence poses a threat to Malay's sovereignty. His stance may deal a serious blow to India's geopolitical strength in the Indian Ocean region vis-a-vis China. The Maldives, strategically located in the Indian Ocean, has been a point of interest for both China and India. Under former President Abdullah Yameen, the Maldives became part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, resulting in significant Chinese loans and investments in the country. With Muizzu's pro-China leanings, Beijing is poised to benefit from this electoral outcome, which could undermine India's influence in the region. Therefore, where are things headed is the question that many are asking. As Muizzu prepares to take office on the 17th of November, there are lingering questions about the future of the Maldives' foreign relations. While he has pledged to address the imbalanced trade relationship with India, completely pivoting towards Beijing may not be feasible. India too remains committed to strengthening its bilateral ties with the Maldives. Analysts believe the change of leadership in the Maldives could present opportunities for Chinese investors and potentially reshape the dynamics of the Indian Ocean region. However, India will likely continue with its developmental aid and seek to maintain its influence in the Maldives. All right, turning to Shri. Shri, it was known from the get-go that here is a president-elect who has very strong pro-China leanings. But now, when he says we do not want India's military presence in our island country, I mean, he seems to have already taken a significant step forward in that direction. What does this really mean?
So, Neha, first of all, I don't buy this argument about, India's military presence is a threat to Maldivian sovereignty, because, the reality is we haven't invaded Maldives. We came, Indian army presence or the Indian, military presence was built in Maldives at the request of the Maldivian government, the previous government, which wanted certain capabilities, whether it is in terms of, let's say, hardware, which is helicopters or aircraft to, strengthen its own Coast Guard. And it didn't have the personnel to run all these equipment, so we had to, Indian government, they asked, and Indian government provided. So it is not as if we have threatened Maldivian sovereignty or anything. So now, does it mean that if Indian army, if Indian military presence is vacated from Maldives, will that create a vacuum which then China will easily fill in? I don't think so either, because now, don't forget, there is now US in this area now. They have physically set up presence in Malé. And now with the new government coming in, the US will be looking at Maldives much more closely than before, when India was, the ally, and, it pretty much allowed India to help Maldives and do things. So if anything, I think, we might see a military presence from the US, because Neha, this is not a new thing. I'm not saying something new. Almost for more than 10 years now, US has been contemplating some sort of a military presence in Maldives, at least a naval presence in Maldives. So that may actually come to fruition. So the best thing which Mr. Muizzu could potentially do is to say that, I'm not going to be anti-India, but I'm also not going to be pro-China. And I'm probably going to be, talking to the bigger brother, US, and then try to build a relationship which helps me develop the Maldivian economy. And therefore, keep my people also happy, that I'm not like picking between two regional competitors, which is India or China, but instead I'm going to, be more friendly with US, although it's tiny compared to the relationship that, it can have with US. But the fact is, US might have a say in how things shape up. And as India is a natural ally of US in this part of the world, I think that works to India's advantage, Neha. So net, I don't think India is going to lose significantly just because there's a new government that's come in Maldives, Neha.
All right, that is significant that the US could perhaps be, in a sense, a balancing factor in that region. All right, moving on to our next story. As tensions between India and China continue to rise, China is set to host the third Trans-Himalaya Forum for International Cooperation in Tibet. That's just about 160 kilometers from India's Arunachal Pradesh, and Pakistan, among other countries, will participate. This event comes shortly after China denied visas to Indian athletes from Arunachal Pradesh for the Asian Games. The Trans-Himalaya Forum for International Cooperation, established in 2018, was intended to foster collaboration among countries in the Himalayan region. The members include China, Pakistan, Mongolia, Afghanistan and others. This year's forum is being hosted in Nyingchi, Tibet, a region administered by China but located, like we said, very close to Arunachal. The proximity of the location of this event to Arunachal Pradesh has raised concerns in India, as China claims Arunachal Pradesh as its own territory, referring to it as South Tibet. In recent years, China has been asserting its territorial claims by releasing new maps and renaming places in the region, claims that India has firmly rejected. Additionally, the denial of visas to Indian athletes from Arunachal Pradesh for the Asian Games led to a formal protest by India and the cancellation of the Indian sports minister's attendance at the Games opening ceremony. This meeting will take place amid an ongoing standoff between India and China along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. India's External Affairs Minister recently described India-China relations as abnormal since the deadly clashes in Galwan Valley in June 2020, which claimed the lives of 20 Indian soldiers. So, Shri, how should we look at this? Is this, in a sense, yet another attempt on part of China to needle India?
Oh, absolutely, Neha. I mean, we should not be surprised that such things are happening. In fact, we should expect such things to happen more frequently, given that China is now really worried that India is, moving closer to the US. So I expect such needling, such provocations to happen more frequently from China's side. And I think India has the maturity to, pick its battles. We should not worry about every pinprick. Because not everything is worth fighting for, not everything is a war. So I think our response then has to be much more mature and muted. This is something that we'll have to learn to live with. The only thing we should, hope for, and I think it's possible that it may never come to this, is a large-scale conflict between India and China. I don't think at this point either India or China wants any kind of a large-scale conflict. We might have instances happening, a Galwan-like incident happening, Neha, but I don't think there's a full-blown war scenario is likely, at least at this point. So as long as these, minor needling, irritation, provocations happen, I think India will have to respond to it appropriately and not, get itself worked up on every little thing. I think our foreign minister, his bureaucrats are quite capable of dealing with these things. And I think we can live with these minor irritations. But I think the objective should be not to allow any kind of a large-scale provocation or any kind of a large-scale war that could potentially, hurt both India and China. So that's one thing we should avoid in this region, Neha.
Clearly, and these are pinpricks that India would do best to avoid reacting to. All right, on that note, thank you so much, Sri, for joining us on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure, Neha. Thank you for having me.
Look forward to having you back tomorrow. All right, let's now move on to our next story. It's a startling revelation reminiscent of Soviet-era history. Russia has reportedly deployed penal units known as Storm Z squads to the front lines in Ukraine. These units consist of individuals with a troubled history, including drunk recruits, insubordinate soldiers, and even convicts. This comes from interviews with 13 individuals with direct knowledge of the matter, including soldiers and relatives of Storm Z members. According to one anonymous soldier, storm fighters, they're just meat. This soldier was stationed near the city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. Storm Z fighters are often considered expendable. This soldier revealed that Storm Z fighters were given lower priority by their commanding officers and described an incident where he provided medical care to wounded Storm Z fighters despite orders to abandon them on the battlefield. The soldier, who requested anonymity because he feared prosecution in Russia for publicly discussing the war, said he had sympathy for the men's plight. He said if the commandants catch anyone with the smell of alcohol on their breath, then they immediately send them to the storm squads. These penal squads, each comprising around 100 to 150 members, are embedded within regular army units and frequently sent to the most dangerous parts of the front lines. They often sustain heavy casualties, with at least 5 Storm Z teams identified as currently involved in repelling a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Storm Z units are distinct from the Wagner mercenary group, which sent convicts to fight on the front lines. Unlike Wagner, Storm Z units operate under the direct command of the Russian Defense Ministry. These squads combine volunteers from among convicts seeking a pardon with regular soldiers facing disciplinary action. The Storm Z squads are perceived, as we said, as expendable infantry by the Russian Defense Ministry. They are sent often to the most perilous areas on the front lines. Although the exact number of Storm Z fighters remains unknown, several hundred of them are believed to be currently deployed. President Vladimir Putin made a reference to convicts fighting in the regular army last Friday. At a televised meeting with a small group of regular Russian servicemen, Putin said he was aware that 2 of their comrades, former prison inmates, had been killed in action. Putin said they gave their lives for the motherland and have fully absolved themselves of their guilt. The deployment of military offenders to the front lines has historical parallels with Joseph Stalin's use of punishment battalions during World War II. Ukraine's government has also been known to release some convicts to fight in the ongoing conflict. The revelation of Storm Z squads and their treatment on the front lines in Ukraine raises significant concerns about the well-being of these fighters and the ethics of their deployment. While the Russian government has officially not acknowledged these units, reports certainly shed light on the dire conditions faced by these penal squads. All right, now we have some news from the Vatican, and it certainly can be seen as a rather progressive move by the Catholic Church. In a surprising but welcome development, Pope Francis has suggested that the Catholic Church could bless same-sex couples, signaling a potential and tectonic shift in the Church's long-standing stance on LGBTQ issues. Responding to a group of cardinals who sought clarity on the matter, the Pope emphasized the importance of pastoral charity when considering such requests. Pope Francis said, and I quote, "We cannot be judges who only deny, reject and exclude." He, however, added that the Church still considered same-sex relationships objectively sinful and would not recognize same-sex marriage. The statement comes as the Church prepares for a weeks-long global gathering at the Vatican to discuss the future of the Catholic Church. The issue of giving blessings to same-sex couples is among several that will be addressed during this event. Pope Francis' comments signify a shift in tone, but remember, the Vatican's doctrinal office had previously ruled against allowing the blessing of same-sex couples back in 2021. However, bishops in various countries such as Belgium and Germany have already allowed priests to bless same-sex couples, creating a complex landscape within the Church. The Pope added, when a blessing is requested, it is expressing a plea to God for help, a supplication to live better. Pastoral prudence must adequately discern whether there are forms of blessings that do not convey a mistaken concept of marriage. He wanted to make that clear. The Pope also emphasized the importance of approaching relationships between people with kindness, patience, understanding, tenderness, and encouragement. Earlier this year, senior figures in the Church of England voted in favor of proposals to allow prayers of blessings for same-sex couples. This decision would enable same-sex couples to seek blessings in Anglican churches after a legal marriage ceremony. Pope Francis's remarks have sparked discussions and even a debate within the Catholic Church and beyond. But like we said, it certainly is a welcome move. All right, and our final story on Global Lens tonight is on the upcoming Paris Olympics, but it's not the kind of story that you would ordinarily expect. It is an unexpected challenge which is crawling its way into the heart of Paris just months before the city hosts the 2024 Summer Olympics. In the picturesque streets of Paris, a new and unwelcome guest has emerged. And no, we're not talking about tourists. These unwelcome guests are bed bugs, which have staged a comeback in the French capital, infesting hotels, rental apartments, movie theatres, and even public transportation. This resurgence is attributed to high population density and increased use of mass transit. During the summer, reports of bedbugs in hotels and rental apartments began circulating. Moviegoers were horrified to discover these tiny pests in theatres. More recently, social media has been abuzz with pictures and videos of bedbugs crawling on seats in high-speed trains and the Paris metro, prompting passengers to sound the alarm. The Transport Minister has pledged to address the issue, vowing to protect the public from this menace. A meeting of public transport operators has been called to discuss a plan of action. Paris City has urged President Emmanuel Macron to take decisive measures, including the creation of a dedicated task force to combat the bed-bug infestation. Despite these concerns, the Deputy Mayor of Paris remains optimistic about the upcoming Olympics. He says there is no threat to the Olympic Games. Bedbugs have existed before and they will continue to exist afterwards. Meanwhile, transportation operators have pledged to remain extremely vigilant. Companies specializing in clearing insect infestations have been inundated in recent weeks. The cost of a single visit can reach several $100s, and often pest control operations need to be repeated. Well, so it seems like Paris at the moment is at war with pests and bed bugs ahead of the Summer Olympics. Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us at the same time tomorrow.
With all this gear, you must be wondering